My name's Emily, and I'm 29. Picture me at my father-in-law Tom's retirement party, surrounded by twinkling string lights and the hum of family chatter. The community center's alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and Tom's proud smile as he shakes hands. I'm holding a glass of wine, feeling like I belong, soaking in the warmth of this big night. Tom's known for giving thoughtful trinkets at these events, and I'm excited to see what's next. But then I catch my stepmother-in-law Margaret's cold glance as she hands out gift bags, skipping me. Something feels off. Have you ever felt invisible at a family gathering? Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if this resonates, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like mine. The party hummed around me, the scent of roasted chicken and fresh rolls filling the air. I stood near a table piled high with desserts, trying to shake off Margaret's cold glance. Maybe I'd misread it. I sipped my wine, scanning the room for Lucas. He was across the hall, adjusting a speaker with his brother Nathan, both of them laughing over some inside joke. I smiled, hoping to catch his eye, but he didn't look my way. Clara, Lucas's sister, sidled up next to me, her floral dress swishing. She clutched a small gift bag, the kind Tom always handed out at family events. "Emily, you tried the cheesecake yet?" she asked, her voice bright, but her eyes darting to the bag in her hands. "Not yet," I said, nodding at the bag. "Those the famous Tom trinkets?" She hesitated, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Yeah, you know, Dad. Always something thoughtful." Her smile flickered, and she turned to grab a plate, leaving the question hanging. My stomach tightened. Why didn't she elaborate? I glanced at Margaret, who was now weaving through the crowd, her silver bracelet glinting as she handed out more gift bags. Each one was tied with a red ribbon, and I could see the gleam of metal inside keychains, probably like the ones Tom gave out at Christmas, each engraved with a name. Nathan got his first, holding it up to the light with a grin. Then Clara, who tucked hers into her purse without a word. My fingers twitched, expecting my turn. Margaret moved past me, her perfume sharp and floral, and handed a bag to Lucas's cousin Hannah, who was chatting near the punch bowl. No glance my way. No pause. My chest tightened, but I told myself it was nothing. She'd get to me. She had to. I set my glass down and walked over to the drink table, hoping to stay busy. Maybe I could help show Margaret I was part of this. "Need a hand?" I asked, keeping my voice light as I approached her. She turned her lips, pressing into a thin line. "Oh, Emily." "Here." She thrust a heavy tray of iced tea pitchers into my hands, the glass clinking. "Pass these around. You're not on the gift list. These are for family." The words hit like a slap. I froze, the tray wobbling slightly. Her eyes were steady, unapologetic, daring me to react. Around us, the party buzzed. Someone laughed, a fork scraped a plate, but all I heard was the blood rushing in my ears. Not family. I'd been married to Lucas for 3 years. I'd spent holidays at Tom's house, helped plan this very party. Margaret. My voice caught, but she was already turning away, handing another gift bag to Nathan's wife, Sheila. My throat burned. I wanted to set the tray down to demand an explanation, but my feet stayed rooted. Hannah caught my eye from across the table, her brow furrowing. She mouthed, "You okay?" I forced a nod, my cheeks hot. I didn't want pity. I started pouring tea, my hands shaking as I filled glasses, avoiding everyone's gaze. Clara appeared again, this time with a plate of cookies. "Emily, you don't have to do that," she said softly, glancing at the tray. "It's fine," I snapped sharper than I meant. Her eyes widened and I softened. "Sorry, just helping out." She bit her lip like she wanted to say something, but then Nathan called her over and she scurried off. I watched her go, the gift bag swinging at her side. My mind flashed to the keychain Tom gave me at our wedding, engraved with daughter. I'd kept it on my car keys, a reminder of the family I thought I'd joined. Had Margaret seen it? Was that why she said it? I poured another glass, my thoughts spiraling. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Tom didn't know. But Margaret's words echoed cold and deliberate. "You're not on the gift list." I looked at Lucas again, still fiddling with the speaker, oblivious. Why hadn't he noticed? Why hadn't he checked on me? Hannah sidled up, her voice low. "Don't let Margaret get to you. She's done this before. Last year she forgot to invite me to the family barbecue. Said I was too distant a cousin. Really, I asked, grateful for the distraction, but still raw. Yeah, she's got this thing about controlling who's in. Drives me nuts." Hannah's tone was light, but her eyes were serious. "You're not alone. Okay?" I nodded, but her words didn't soothe the ache. I wasn't alone, but I felt it. The tray grew heavier in my hands, the ice clinking like a countdown. Margaret was still circling her smile tight as she handed out more bags. Each ribbon she tied felt like a door slamming shut. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, but her words had been so clear. Not family. I set the tray down, my hands trembling. I needed air, or Lucas, or something to make this right. But the party kept moving, and I was stuck holding a pitcher of tea, wondering where I fit. The punch cup trembled in my hand as Margaret's voice rang out, calling everyone to the center of the community hall for the slideshow. I stayed in my corner by the coat rack, my pulse hammering. The room dimmed, and a projector beam flickered to life, casting old photos of Tom's teaching days across a white screen. Guests settled into chairs, their gift bags tucked at their feet while I stood frozen. Hannah's words echoing in my mind. Margaret's good at making people feel small. I scanned for Lucas, hoping he'd finally notice me. He was near the front, helping Clara adjust the projector, his face lit by the screen's glow. I took a shaky breath and started toward him, weaving through the crowd. If I could just reach him, tell him what Margaret said, maybe he'd fix this. But as I got closer, Nathan stepped in front of me, his broad frame blocking my path. "Need something, Emily?" he asked, his tone sharp, a smirk tugging at his lips. He held his keychain, spinning it lazily between his fingers. I swallowed, my mouth dry. Just trying to find Lucas. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "He's busy. Big night for Dad, you know. No need to make a scene." His eyes flicked to the punch cup I was clutching, and I realized he'd heard Margaret's jab about me not being family. My face burned. "I'm not making a scene," I said, but my voice wavered. "Sure," he said, stepping closer, his voice low. "Look, you're just the in-law. Don't expect special treatment." The words cut deeper than Margaret's. I stepped back, my heel catching on a chair leg, nearly spilling the punch. Nathan chuckled loud enough for a few heads to turn and walked off to join Sheila. I stood there, my chest tight, the room spinning. Guests were focused on the slideshow, Tom shaking hands with the principal, Tom cutting a ribbon, but all I could feel was the weight of Nathan's sneer. I set the cup on a table, my hands shaking, and slipped toward the back of the room. I needed to move, to do something, but Margaret's voice cut through again. "Everyone, please take your seats. We're honoring Tom's legacy tonight." She stood by the stage, her smile polished, handing out small packets, now letters from Tom, handwritten, tucked into envelopes. She gave one to Clara, then Sheila, then a cousin I barely knew. Each name she called felt like a door slamming shut. I hovered near a table, pretending to adjust a napkin stack, but my eyes were locked on Margaret. She moved with purpose, her heels clicking, making sure every family member got their letter. I waited, my heart pounding, hoping she'd turn to me. She didn't. Instead, she handed an envelope to Hannah's mom, who wasn't even here regularly, and my stomach dropped. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. Clara caught my eye from the stage, her face pale. She mouthed something, maybe sorry, but looked away when Margaret called her to help with the next slide. I wanted to scream at her to stop hiding, to say something, but I couldn't. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I glanced at Lucas again, now seated near Nathan, his attention on the screen. Why wasn't he looking for me? Why hadn't he noticed I was falling apart? Margaret's voice shifted sweeter now. These letters are Tom's way of thanking his family for their support. Each one's personal. She held up an envelope, her eyes sweeping the room, skipping right over me. A few guests clapped, and I felt their eyes on me, or maybe I imagined it. My dress felt too tight, my throat raw. I backed up, bumping into a chair, and a woman I didn't know whispered to her friend, "Did she not get one?" The humiliation burned. I turned and headed for the hallway, my steps quick, desperate for air. The slideshow droned on Tom at a school play, Tom with his grandkids, but it felt like a mockery. I pushed open the bathroom door and leaned against the sink, gripping the cold porcelain. My reflection stared back, eyes, red jaw tight. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, anger surged, hot and sharp. How dare Margaret do this? How dare Nathan laugh? And Lucas, where was he? The door creaked, and Hannah slipped in her face, soft with concern. Emily, I saw you leave. What happened? I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. Nathan said, I'm just the in-law. Margaret's giving out letters now, and I'm not even on her radar. It's like I don't exist. Hannah's jaw tightened. That's awful. She did this to me once, you know. At Tom's 65th, she made me sit at the kids' table because there wasn't room. I cried for days. I nodded her story a small comfort, but my mind was racing. Why does Tom let her? He's never made me feel like this. Hannah sighed, leaning against the wall. He loves her, but she wears him down. Always has. I think he picks his battles. Her words twisted the knife. If Tom was picking battles, he wasn't picking mine. I splashed water on my face, trying to steady myself, but the anger kept building. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. At Margaret, at Nathan, at Clara's silence, at Lucas's absence. I dried my hands, my resolve hardening. I couldn't stay in here forever, but as I reached for the door, I heard Margaret's voice through the wall, calling for the next part of the program. The night wasn't over, and I knew she wasn't done. I pushed the bathroom door open, the cool air of the hallway hitting my face, but it did nothing to calm the storm inside me. Hannah followed her footsteps soft behind me, but I barely registered her presence. Margaret's voice echoed from the main hall, now announcing a video montage of Tom's career highlights. The crowd's murmurs and scattered applause felt like a wall between me and the family I thought I knew. My hands still trembled from gripping the sink, and my chest ached like it was caving in. I hesitated at the edge of the hall, peering through the doorway. The projector screen glowed with a clip of Tom speaking at a school assembly, his voice warm and steady. Everyone was seated, their faces lit with pride, clutching their letters and gift bags. I scanned for Lucas, my heart sinking when I saw him in the front row, leaning toward Nathan, whispering something that made them both grin. My stomach churned. How could he be so oblivious? How could he sit there laughing while I was unraveling? I took a step forward, intending to slip back into the crowd, but Margaret's sharp gaze caught me. She stood near the stage, holding a stack of envelopes, her posture rigid. Emily. She called, her voice cutting through the low hum of the video. The dessert table's looking low. Could you restock the plates? The room seemed to pause. A A few heads turned their eyes, darting between me and Margaret. My throat tightened, but I nodded, not trusting my voice. I felt like a servant in my own family story, and she knew it. I turned toward the kitchen, my legs heavy, each step a battle against the urge to scream. Hannah grabbed my arm, her voice low. "You don't have to do this. She's baiting you." "I know," I whispered, but I kept moving. If I stopped, I'd fall apart. The kitchen was a small fluorescent-lit room behind the hall, cluttered with trays of cookies and half-empty pitchers. I grabbed a stack of dessert plates, my fingers fumbling, and started piling on brownies and lemon bars. The clatter of dishes drowned out the video, but not Margaret's voice in my head. Not family. Not on the gift list. As I worked, Clara appeared in the doorway. Her arms crossed her gift bag dangling from one hand. "Emily, you okay?" she asked, her voice tentative. I didn't look up. "Fine, just doing what Margaret asked." My tone was sharper than I meant, but I didn't care. She shifted her shoes, scuffing the linoleum. "I saw what she did with the letters. I didn't know I thought she'd include you. You thought I set a plate down hard," the clink echoing. "You saw her skip me, Clara. You heard her say, 'I'm not family,' and you just stood there." Her face flushed, and she looked at the floor. "It's complicated. She's particular. I didn't want to make it worse." "Worse for who?" I snapped, my voice rising. "For you." "For her. Because it's pretty damn bad for me right now." Clara opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes glistening. She turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the trays. My anger flared, but underneath it was a deeper ache. Clara was supposed to be my ally, my sister-in-law, the one who'd braided my hair before my wedding. Her silence hurt almost as much as Margaret's words. I carried the plates back to the hall, my arms straining under the weight. The video was ending, and Margaret was now passing out programs for the evening speeches, each one printed with a family crest Tom had designed years ago. She handed them to everyone, Nathan, Sheila, even Diane, who wasn't blood family but got one anyway. I set the plates on the dessert table, my hands shaking so badly a brownie slid off. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and chose to look away. I caught Lucas's eye as he stood to help with the stage setup again, but he just gave me a quick smile before turning back to Nathan. That smile, so casual, so unaware, broke something in me. I'd spent 3 years building a life with him, sharing his family, his history. I'd laughed at Tom's bad puns, helped Clara move into her apartment, even baked Nathan's favorite pie for his birthday. And now, I was invisible. Margaret's voice cut through again, directing guests to take their programs. "These are for the family to keep," she said, her eyes locking on mine for a split second, daring me to react. I didn't. I couldn't. My anger was turning into something heavier, something that pressed against my ribs and made it hard to breathe. I moved to clear empty plates from a nearby table, my movements mechanical. A guest, an older woman with a kind face, touched my arm. "You're doing a great job, dear," she said, her voice soft. I forced a smile, but her kindness only made it worse. She didn't know I was supposed to be family, not the help. As I stacked the plates, I overheard Nathan talking to Sheila, his voice carrying over the crowd. "She's fine with it. Always eager to please, right?" He laughed, and Sheila giggled, their programs tucked neatly in their hands. My vision blurred not with tears, but with rage. They were talking about me, dismissing me, while Lucas stood just feet away saying nothing. I set the plates down, my hands clenching into fists. The hall felt like it was closing in the laughter and chatter suffocating. Margaret was now at the front, handing Tom his program, her smile triumphant. I looked at him, willing him to see me to do something, but he was focused on the stage preparing for his speech. My heart sank. If Tom didn't notice, if Lucas didn't care, if Clara wouldn't speak, then who was I here? The weight of that question pressed harder, and I knew the worst was still coming. The hall pulsed with anticipation as Margaret took the stage, her voice crisp over the microphone. I stood by the dessert table, my hands still clenched from stacking plates, the sting of Nathan's words and Lucas's indifference burning in my chest. The crowd settled, their programs rustling as Margaret raised a glass. "Before Tom's speech, we have one last family toast," she announced, her smile wide, but her eyes cold. A special moment to honor those closest to him. My heart lurched. Another family moment, another chance to be left out. I scanned the room, searching for a way to disappear, but every exit felt too far. Margaret gestured to a table beside her, where a tray of engraved wine glasses sparkled under the stage lights. Each one had a name etched in elegant script: Lucas, Nathan, Clara, Sheila, even Hannah's mom. My throat tightened. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't look away. Margaret began handing out the glasses, calling each name with a flourish. "To Nathan, for always making us proud," she said, her voice dripping with affection as he strode up, grinning. "To Clara, our heart," she continued, and Clara accepted hers with a tight smile, her eyes flicking to me for a split second. The crowd clapped, the sound swallowing my shallow breaths. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Tom had told her to include me. But as Margaret handed a glass to Sheila, then to Tom's cousin Mark, my hope crumbled. She was circling the family, her movements deliberate, her gaze never landing on me. The room seemed to tilt, the chatter and clinking glasses fading into a dull roar. Then she stopped, holding the last glass. "And one for me," she said, her voice sharp for standing by Tom all these years. She lifted it, the crowd murmuring approval, and my stomach dropped. Not even a mention of me. Not even a pretense. Margaret turned to me, her expression unreadable, and picked up a plain plastic cup from the tray. She walked over her heels, clicking, and thrust it into my hands. "This is for you, Emily," she said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You're not real family, but you can still join the toast." The words landed like a punch. The room went silent, or maybe it was just my world collapsing. Faces turned, Nathan's smirk, Sheila's raised eyebrow, Clara's wide-eyed stare. My hands shook, the plastic cup creaking under my grip. I wanted to throw it, to scream, to run, but my feet were glued to the floor. My face burned, every eye in the room a spotlight on my humiliation. I looked at Lucas, praying he'd stand up, say something, anything. He was frozen in his seat, his face pale, his program crumpled in his hand. Our eyes met, and for a moment I thought I saw guilt. But he didn't move. He didn't speak. The betrayal cut deeper than Margaret's words, slicing through 3 years of marriage in a single moment. Diane, Tom's neighbor, leaned toward her friend, whispering something, her eyes soft with pity. Hannah, standing near the back, shook her head, her fists clenched. But no one said a word. The silence was deafening, broken only by Margaret's satisfied hum as she returned to the stage. "Now let's raise our glasses," she said, oblivious or uncaring of the tension. My vision blurred, not with tears, but with a raw, searing pain. This wasn't just exclusion, it was erasure. I'd helped plan this party, spent weeks choosing the menu, hung decorations with Clara, all to celebrate Tom. I'd sat through family dinners, laughed at old stories, thought I'd earned a place. And now, I was holding a cheap plastic cup marked as an outsider in front of everyone. I took a step back, my heel catching on the carpet. I wanted to leave, to grab my purse and walk out, but something held me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the faint hope that Tom would see this, that he'd fix it. He was still seated near the stage, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly. Was he avoiding my gaze? Did he even know? Margaret raised her glass higher, her voice booming. "To Tom and to family." The crowd echoed her, their glasses glinting, while I stood there, the plastic cup heavy in my hand. I couldn't lift it. I couldn't breathe. My eyes locked on Tom, willing him to look up, to do something, but he didn't. The room spun, and I felt myself teetering on the edge of breaking. Then, as Margaret lowered her glass, Tom stood his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He reached for the microphone, his movements slow, deliberate. My heart stopped. Was he going to speak? Was he going to let this stand? I gripped the cup tighter, my pulse racing, every nerve on fire, waiting for what came next. Tom's hand closed around the microphone, the faint squeal of feedback cutting through the hall. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst the plastic cup in my hand, slick with sweat. The crowd hushed their glasses, still raised eyes shifting from Margaret to Tom. I stood rooted by the dessert table, every muscle taut, waiting for him to speak to undo the wound Margaret had carved into me. His face was unreadable, his jaw tight, and for a fleeting moment I thought he'd call me forward, make this right. He cleared his throat, his voice low but steady. "Thank you all for being here." He began, his eyes sweeping the room, lingering on Lucas, then Nathan, then Margaret. My breath caught, but his gaze passed over me, landing on the back wall. This night means a lot. My career, my family, it's all I've got. My stomach twisted. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't addressing Margaret's cruelty. The cup creaked as my grip tightened, and a crack spiderwebbed up its side. The crowd murmured, nodding, but I felt like I was sinking the floor, dropping beneath me. Was he going to let this stand? After everything, after calling me his daughter, after all the years I'd tried to belong? Margaret stepped closer to him, her smile triumphant, one hand resting on his arm, like she owned the moment. "Go on, Tom," she said, her voice smooth, urging him to continue. The crowd leaned in expectant, but I could barely hear over the roar in my ears. My eyes darted to Lucas, still seated, his hands now clasped tightly, his face a mask of confusion. Why wasn't he standing? Why wasn't anyone stopping this? Tom's voice grew stronger, recounting his years as a principal, the students he'd mentored, the community he'd built. Each word felt like a brick walling me out. I scanned the faces around me. Clara staring at her lap, her fingers twisting her program. Nathan leaning back with a smug grin. Sheila whispering to a cousin, her eyes flicking to me with something like amusement. Hannah stood near the back, her arms crossed, her expression dark, but even she didn't move. My chest burned, the pain so sharp it stole my breath. This wasn't just Margaret's doing anymore. It was everyone's silence, everyone's choice to let me stand here marked as less than. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up with Lucas planning this party, picking out Tom's favorite songs for the playlist. I thought of the Christmas I'd spent knitting scarves for Clara's kids, the way Tom had hugged me when I brought him homemade soup during a snowstorm. All of it felt like a lie now, a cruel joke I'd been too naive to see. Tom paused, his voice softening. "Family's what keeps us grounded," he said, and my heart leapt, a desperate spark of hope flaring. Maybe this was it. Maybe he'd call me out, acknowledge me. But then he turned to Margaret, his eyes warm. And I couldn't have done it without my wife. The crowd clapped, the sound crashing over me like a wave. Margaret beamed, her glass raised again, and I felt something inside me shatter. He wasn't going to fix this. He was choosing her, choosing this moment over me. My vision blurred the room, a haze of faces and lights. I wanted to scream, to demand why I wasn't enough, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of their applause. I took a step toward the exit, my legs unsteady, the cracked cup still clutched in my hand. I didn't care who saw me leave. I didn't care if they whispered. But as I reached the edge of the crowd, Tom's voice stopped me cold. "Wait," he said, the mic amplifying the word, making the room freeze. There's one thing I saved for last. My breath caught my body turning despite myself. His eyes found mine steady and intense, and for the first time all night I felt seen. But the hope was laced with dread, the weight of every slight, every silence pressing down. What could he say now to undo this? What could possibly make this right? My heart raced, torn between longing and fear, as the hall held its breath, waiting for his next words. The stage lights felt hotter now, my words still echoing in the silent hall. I stood there, the locket clutched in my palm, Tom's hand steady on my shoulder. The crowd's whispers grew a soft wave of voices, but I kept my eyes on Margaret. Her face was stone, her glass lowered, her control slipping. I'd called her out not with screams but with truth, and the weight of it hung between us. Lucas was halfway to the stage, his steps hesitant, his eyes locked on mine, pleading for something I wasn't ready to give. I stepped back from the mic, my breath uneven, but my resolve like steel. I wasn't done. Not yet. I turned to Tom, my voice low, just for him. "Thank you for this," I said, holding up the locket. "But I need to do something else." His eyes softened, a flicker of pride crossing his face, and he nodded, stepping aside. I moved to the edge of the stage, my gaze sweeping the room. Lucas reached the steps, his hand outstretched, but I shook my head slightly. Not now. I needed to finish this on my own. I faced the crowd again, my heart steady despite the tremor in my hands. I've spent tonight carrying trays, pouring drinks, trying to prove I belong. I said, my voice clear, cutting through the murmurs. But I don't have to prove anything. I'm here because I love this family, because I chose it. And I'm staying, not because of a gift, but because I know my worth. A few guests clapped Diane's hands coming together first, her smile wide. Hannah nodded fiercely, her eyes bright, and even Clara's shoulders relaxed, a tear slipping down her cheek. Nathan sat rigid, his program crumpled in his lap, his smirk gone. Sheila shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to Margaret, who hadn't moved, her expression a mix of shock and rage. I looked at Lucas, his face raw with guilt, and felt a pang. I loved him, but his silence tonight had cracked something between us. I needed him to hear this to understand. Family isn't perfect. I continued, my voice softer now. But it's not about pushing people out. It's about pulling them in, even when it's hard. The crowd was with me, their faces a mix of awe and unease. I felt their support, but also their tension. Margaret's allies, Nathan's friends, all waiting for her response. I didn't care. For the first time all night, I wasn't afraid of her. I'd spent hours shrinking, hiding. But now I stood tall, the locket a quiet anchor in my hand. Lucas climbed the steps, his voice low, urgent. "Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I should have." "Not now," I said, my tone firm, but not cruel. "We'll talk, but I need to finish this." His face fell, but he nodded, stepping back, giving me the space I'd claimed. It hurt to push him away, but it also freed me. I wasn't just his wife tonight. I was Emily, and I was enough. I turned to the crowd one last time, my eyes finding Diane, then Hannah, then Clara. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady, final. "This is my family too, and I'll keep showing up no matter what." The applause started slow, then grew a wave of sound that wrapped around me. Diane stood clapping, and Hannah joined her grin wide. Clara wiped her eyes, her hands coming together softly. Even some of Tom's colleagues nodded, their faces warm with respect. Margaret stayed silent, her glass now on the table, her hands clenched at her sides. Nathan looked at the floor, his jaw tight, and Sheila's smile was gone, her program forgotten. I stepped off the stage, the locket still in my hand, my steps sure. Lucas followed his presence, a quiet weight behind me, but I didn't turn to him. Not yet. I walked to the center of the hall, where the crowd parted slightly, their eyes on me, not with pity, but with something new admiration. I stopped by the dessert table where the cracked plastic cup still sat and picked it up. I held it for a moment, feeling its cheap weight, then set it down gently, deliberately, like closing a chapter. I looked up, my gaze meeting Margaret's across the room. Her eyes were cold, but for the first time, they didn't scare me. I'd spoken my truth, claimed my place, and no one could take that away. I slipped the locket into my pocket, its warmth a reminder of Tom's love, and stood there silent, my shoulders squared, ready for whatever came next. The applause faded, leaving a heavy quiet in the community hall. I stood by the dessert table, the locket now tucked in my pocket, its weight a small anchor. My words still hung in the air, raw and unyielding, and the crowd's eyes lingered on me, their warmth mingling with unease. I'd claimed my place, but the room felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Lucas hovered a few steps away, his hands in his pockets, his face tight with something unspoken. I didn't meet his gaze. Not yet. Margaret broke the silence first. She swept toward the stage's edge, her heels sharp against the wood, and grabbed a stack of napkins, her movements jerky. "Let's keep the night moving," she said. Her voice clipped, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She handed the napkins to a server, avoiding my direction entirely. The crowd stirred, some returning to their seats, others whispering in tight clusters. Her dismissal was deliberate, a refusal to acknowledge what I'd said, but her trembling hands betrayed her. I stayed where I was, my pulse steady, but my chest tight. The power I'd felt on stage hadn't faded, but it was shifting, settling into something heavier, awareness of the rift I'd exposed. Nathan slouched in his chair, his jaw set, staring at the table like it held answers. Sheila leaned toward him, murmuring, but he shook his head, his usual swagger gone. I'd called them out not by name, but by truth, and it had landed. Clara approached her steps hesitant, her eyes red from crying. She stopped a few feet away, clutching her wine glass like a lifeline. "Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I should have said something earlier. I didn't know how." I knotted my throat tight. Her apology was real, but it came late after I'd had to fight alone. "I know it's hard," I said, my voice low, "but silence hurts more than you think." She flinched, her fingers tightening on the glass. "I'll do better," she said, and I believed her, but the ache of her earlier absence lingered. She lingered a moment, then drifted back to her seat, her shoulders hunched. Tom was still on stage, speaking quietly with Diane, who'd joined him to help with the next segment. He glanced my way, his expression a mix of pride and worry, and I gave him a small nod. His locket had given me strength, but my words had been my own, and I saw in his eyes that he knew it. He turned back to Diane, but his posture was stiffer now, like he was bracing for what came next. Guests began milling again, some approaching the dessert table, their voices hushed. An older man, one of Tom's former colleagues, paused beside me. "That took guts," he said, his tone kind but careful. "Not easy to stand up like that." I forced a small smile. Didn't feel like I had a choice. He nodded, grabbing a cookie, but his words stayed with me, a reminder that my stand had been seen, felt. Others glanced my way, Hannah's mom, a few cousins, but no one else spoke. Their silence wasn't cruel, just cautious, like they were waiting to see how the night would unravel. Lucas finally moved closer, his voice low. "Can we talk?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. His tie was slightly crooked, his hands restless, I shook my head, not out of anger, but exhaustion. Later, I said. I need a minute. His face fell, but he didn't push, stepping back to help with the stage setup again. I hated the distance between us, but I needed space to breathe, to hold on to the strength I'd found. Margaret's absence from the stage was conspicuous. I spotted her near the back, rearranging a flower centerpiece with sharp, precise movements. She was retreating, but not defeated. Her silence was a strategy, a way to regain control. I felt a flicker of unease. She wouldn't let this go, not easily. Hannah slipped up beside me, her voice soft. People are talking, she said, leaning against the table, her arms crossed. Not just about you, but about Margaret. They're saying she went too far. I glanced at her, surprised. They are. She nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. One of Tom's cousins told me she's never seen Margaret this rattled. You shook her, Emily. You shook all of us. Her words should have felt good, but they didn't. They were heavy, a reminder of the cost. I'd wanted to be seen, not to fracture the family. I looked at Clara now, sitting alone, her glass empty. Her fingers tracing the edge of her program. She'd apologized, but the distance between us lingered, a wound that hadn't healed. I wondered if it ever would. Tom's voice came over the mic, pulling my attention. We're wrapping up soon, he said, his tone warm but strained. But I want to thank you all again. He didn't mention me, didn't need to, but his glance in my direction carried weight. I felt his gratitude, but also his exhaustion, like he was carrying the night's tension alone. I wanted to go to him to tell him I was okay, but Margaret's shadow loomed too large. She'd moved to the exit now, speaking sharply to a server about cleanup, her voice cutting through the low hum of the crowd. Guests parted around her, their conversations faltering, and I saw it, the subtle shift in how they looked at her. Less deference, more caution. I'd done that, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on a fault line, waiting for the ground to shift again. A woman I didn't know, maybe a neighbor, approached me, her voice soft. I lost my place in my husband's family years ago, she said, her eyes distant. What you said up there, it reminded me I could have fought harder. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. I had to say it. She smiled, sad but kind, and walked away, leaving me with her words. They were a gift, but they added to the weight. I'd spoken for myself, but also for others, and that responsibility settled deep. I looked around at Nathan's slumped shoulders, Clara's quiet guilt, Lucas's restless pacing. My truth had rippled out, touching them all, but it hadn't healed me. Not yet. The hall grew quieter, guests starting to leave, their footsteps echoing. I stood still, my hand in my pocket, the locket's shape familiar now. I'd won something tonight, but I'd also lost something more. And trust eased, the naive belief that love was enough. The room felt emptier, not just of people, but of the warmth I'd walked in with. I closed my eyes, the hum of the night fading, and let the silence swallow me, heavy and complete. A week had passed since Tom's retirement party, and I was sitting on our front porch, the late afternoon sun filtering through the oak tree in our yard. The air smelled of cut grass and blooming jasmine, a quiet contrast to the chaos of that night. I held a notebook in my lap, its pages filled with scribbled thoughts, fragments of what I'd felt, what I'd said, what I still couldn't name. The locket Tom gave me hung around my neck, its weight familiar now, a quiet reminder of the stand I'd taken. I traced the locket's swirls with my thumb, my mind drifting. The party had changed something in me, not in a loud way, but deep, like a river carving a new path. I wasn't the same woman who'd walked into that hall eager to please, afraid of being left out. I'd found my voice, and though it had cost me, it had also freed me. I wrote a line in my notebook. I'm not invisible anymore. The words looked small on the page, but they felt vast. Lucas was inside cooking dinner, the clatter of pots faint through the screen door. We hadn't talked much since the party, not because I was angry, but because I needed time to sort through the pieces. He'd tried leaving me coffee in the morning, asking gentle questions, but I wasn't ready to unpack it all. Not yet. I needed this quiet, first this space to hear my own thoughts. I set the notebook down and leaned back in the wicker chair, closing my eyes. The neighborhood hummed softly, kids biking down the street, a dog barking in the distance. I let the sounds wash over me, grounding me in this moment. I thought about Tom, about the way he'd looked at me when I left the party. His eyes full of gratitude, but also regret. He'd called yesterday, inviting us to dinner at his house. Just the three of us, no Margaret. I'd said yes, not because it was easy, but because I wanted to rebuild what we had on my terms. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, pulling me back. It was a text from Clara Brunch this Sunday. Just cousins. You in? I stared at the screen, a small warmth spreading in my chest. Clara had been texting more since the party. Short messages, cautious, but sincere. This was different. An invitation to something new. A table where I'd have a seat. I typed back, I'm in, and set the phone down, my lips curving slightly. I picked up my notebook again, flipping to a blank page. I started writing about the party, not the pain, but the moment I'd stood on that stage, the way my voice had carried steady and sure. It wasn't just about Margaret or the family. It was about me, about choosing to be seen. I wrote about the woman I'd been always smoothing things over, and the woman I was becoming, someone who could hold her ground without losing her heart. The screen door creaked, and Lucas stepped out, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He didn't speak, just sat in the chair beside me, his presence quiet but steady. I glanced at him, his profile soft in the fading light, and felt a flicker of the love that had always tethered us. We weren't fixed, but we were here, and that was a start. I closed my notebook, the words inside enough for now. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of peach and gold, and I let out a slow breath, feeling the world settle around me. For the first time in days, I wasn't fighting. I was just here whole in my own skin, ready to step into whatever came next. The sky deepened to a soft purple, the last streaks of sunlight fading behind the oak. I sat on the porch, Lucas beside me, the quiet between us, not heavy, but full, like we were both learning how to be again. I slipped my notebook into my bag, its pages, now a map of the woman I was piecing together. The locket rested against my chest, its cool metal a steady pulse, and I felt a calm I hadn't known I could hold. I stood, stretching my arms, and walked to the edge of the porch, my sandals scuffing the wood. The street was still now, the kids gone, the dog quiet. I leaned against the railing, looking out at our small yard where a patch of wildflowers swayed in the evening breeze. They'd grown without much care, stubborn and bright, and I smiled, seeing a bit of myself in them. Tomorrow I'd visit Diane, Tom's neighbor, who'd left a voicemail inviting me for coffee. She'd mentioned wanting to share stories about Tom, about his quiet kindness over the years. I didn't need the stories to love him, but I wanted them, wanted to weave them into the family I was choosing to keep. I thought about calling Hannah too to plan for Clara's brunch. It wasn't just about showing up, it was about building something new, something mine. Lucas stood, joining me at the railing, his hands resting lightly on the wood. He didn't speak, and I didn't need him to. His presence was enough a promise we'd talk when the time was right. I glanced at him, his eyes catching the last light, and saw the man I'd married flawed, but trying. We'd find our way not back to what we were, but to something stronger built on truth. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small pebble I'd picked up on a walk last week, smooth and gray, worn by time. I turned it over in my hand, feeling its cool surface, and set it on the railing. It was nothing special, just a marker of a moment I'd chosen to keep moving. I'd carried so much weight from the party. Margaret's words, Nathan's dismissal, Clara's hesitation, but here now, I could set it down, piece by piece. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of jasmine, and I closed my eyes, letting it wrap around me. I thought about my dad gone 5 years now, and the way he'd always said, "You're enough, kid." I hadn't believed him then, but I was starting to. The party had cracked me open, but it had also shown me my own strength, the kind that didn't need applause or approval. I opened my eyes, the world soft and still. Lucas reached for my hand, his fingers warm, and I let him hold it, not because I needed him to, but because I wanted him there. The pebble sat on the railing, a quiet testament to the steps I'd taken. I breathed in slow and deep and felt the calm settle deeper, a steady glow that would carry me forward, no matter what lay ahead. Months had passed since Tom's retirement party, and I found myself in his backyard, the late summer air thick with the scent of grilled corn and fresh-cut grass. The gathering was small, just Tom, Lucas, Clara, Hannah, and a few cousins, their laughter soft under the glow of patio lanterns. I sat in a folding chair, a glass of lemonade sweating in my hand, watching the fire pit's embers flicker. The locket still hung around my neck, but it felt lighter now, part of me like the scars I'd learned to carry. Life had settled into a new rhythm. I'd started waking early, brewing coffee before dawn, and sitting at our kitchen table with a sketch pad. I wasn't an artist, but drawing simple things like the curve of a mug or the outline of our oak tree gave me a way to see the world clearly, to hold on to the small moments that grounded me. It was something I did for myself, not for anyone else, and that felt like a quiet victory. Tom moved through the group, his apron smudged with barbecue sauce, his smile easy. He'd changed since the party too, not in big ways, but in the way he listened, the way he checked in with me. Last week, over coffee, he'd told me about his early years with Margaret, how her need to control came from losing her first family young. It didn't excuse her, but it helped me see her as human, not a monster. I didn't forgive her, not fully, but I'd stopped letting her define me. Lucas sat across from me, tossing a bottle cap between his hands, his laugh mingling with Hannah's. We'd been talking more not just about the party, but about us, our fears, our hopes, the life we wanted. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. We'd started taking evening walks, no phones, just the two of us, and the crickets rebuilding trust one step at a time. I loved him differently now, with eyes wide open, and that felt truer than before. Clara caught my eye, raising her glass in a small toast. She'd kept her promise from the party, showing up to brunch, texting me recipes, inviting me to game nights. Her kids had started calling me Aunt Emily, their voices bright when they ran to me with drawings. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new, something we both chose. I smiled back, the warmth in my chest, real steady. I leaned back, the chair creaking, and watched the stars peek through the dusk. The party had been a breaking point, but it had also been a beginning. I'd spent so long trying to fit to be what others needed, but now I was learning to be enough for myself. I sipped my lemonade, the tartness sharp on my tongue, and let the moment sink in. The chatter faded to a hum, and I closed my eyes, breathing slow, feeling the weight of the past slip a little further away. The fire pit's glow softened as the night deepened the backyard alive with the hum of crickets and the clink of glasses. I set my lemonade down, my fingers tracing the armrest of the chair, the wood worn smooth by years of gatherings. Tom was telling a story now, his hands animated, describing a prank his students pulled decades ago. Everyone laughed, their faces bright, and I felt a quiet joy, not loud, but steady like a heartbeat. This was family, not perfect, but mine. I thought about the months since the party, how I'd started setting boundaries small but firm. I'd said no to hosting a cousin's baby shower when it felt like too much, choosing a quiet weekend with Lucas instead. I'd begun writing letters not to send, but to release, pouring out the hurt I'd carried, then tucking them away in a drawer. Each one lightened me, made room for something new. I wasn't running from the pain anymore. I was learning to hold it gently, to let it teach me. Nathan was here tonight, quieter than usual, sitting at the edge of the group. He'd called Lucas last week, not to apologize, but to talk haltingly about his own doubts. I didn't need his regret, but seeing him try, even imperfectly, reminded me that change was possible, slow as it might be. I didn't hate him or Margaret, or even Clara's old silence. I'd found a place beyond anger, where I could choose who to keep close and who to let fade. I stood brushing my hands on my jeans and walked to the fire pit, picking up a stick to nudge the logs. The flames flared briefly, casting light across the yard, and I felt everyone's eyes on me, soft, not judging. Tom paused, his story, his smile warm, and I knew he saw it, the woman I'd become, not just his daughter-in-law, but someone whole. I tossed the stick into the fire, watching it catch, and felt a final piece of the past burn away. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was, this family isn't a title you're given or a seat you're owed. It's what you build day by day with the people who see you and with the strength you find in yourself. I'd spent so long chasing approval, but the party taught me to stand still, to claim my own space. Not because I was perfect, but because I was enough. That was freedom, not winning, not proving, just being. I sat back down, the fire's warmth on my face, and let the night wrap around me. Lucas reached for my hand, his fingers threading through mine, and I squeezed back, not because I had to, but because I chose to. The stars were brighter now, the laughter softer, and I knew I'd carry this moment forward, a quiet promise to keep building, keep choosing, keep being me. If you've ever had to fight for your place to prove you belong, what did it teach you about yourself? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our strength and to carrying it gently into tomorrow.